She is the CEO of Zamna, an award-winning venture-backed software company working with airlines and governments to validate passenger passports and health status via GDPR-compliant patent software. Clients include British Airways, Owner International Airlines Group. Prior to founding Zamna, she co-founded 3 other companies across multiple verticals. She speaks 9 languages and has 4 children and has received many awards for her work with Zamna. Ladies and gentlemen, for her presentation on identity management, facilitating and security future travel, AVSEC Global invites to the stage Ms. Irra Ariella Key.
Thank you. Good afternoon. How good to see you all. I think it's always dangerous to be a speaker after lunch. So I'm going to invite you all to do one quick thing with me. Can we all stand up for 5 seconds, please? I warned the organizers I'm going to do this. I'm sorry. All right, guys. Let's just shake out our hands, stretch up, and then give yourself a round of applause for being here. 1, and 2, and 3, and 4, and faster, 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 faster. And we stop and breathe. Thank you so much. An applause to you for still being here and being focused for our wonderful AVSEC presentation. Have a quick seat, and I'll tell you why I'm here today. So we know that we live in this energetic post-COVID world of travel. And a round of applause for everyone who had to show their documents multiple times when you had to travel here. It is hell on earth. Now, quickly about me and why I'm qualified to tell you about this today. As a graduate of Oxford University, I actually finished in the top 1% of my class, and I was meant to be in academia my whole life. My stepfather is actually the oldest serving professor at Oxford University today, and I'm a big disappointment I didn't become an academic. Instead, I used some of my research at Oxford to start the business and the technology I will share with you today. Our first customer, as you heard from the introduction, is International Airlines Group. And of course, before COVID, we also were working with Emirates. And I have a picture here in the middle of the team at Dubai Futures who were kind enough to host us. And if COVID hadn't happened, we would have still been here today. So I'm really glad to finally be back with Emirates. So in a post-COVID world of travel, we're definitely not going back. We know that when aviation started, there were no checks. And then your passport was enough, your document, to get on the plane. After 9/11, as we all heard 20 years ago, physical checks came in and they didn't go back. And now, to get in this very room, we have to make sure that we are not a biological threat. This is the new age, and the world has changed forever. When we think of the reality of how expensive this can get and how dangerous for AVSEC principles, we only need to look to my home country, the UK, which fines £2,000 every time an airline gets one passenger's data wrong. This is nothing compared to what happened across the pond when Hong Kong imposed a 2-week ban, as you all will know, on Singapore Airlines for getting just 3 data sets wrong in the passenger list. This was to do with health checks as well as identity, because the world of identity and health has collided irreversibly. We're not going back. And this is very costly, of course, from a cybersecurity perspective as well. We now have the airline holding passengers' super sensitive identity data, as well as all of the super sensitive health data that we are expected to put together in order to establish our status to fly. So identity for the passenger has also changed irreversibly and forever. And the crazy thing is, if you've seen the news on BBC recently, queues up to 7 hours long are happening because of the manual checks. This is before the passenger even gets airside. This is just for somebody to manually take your phone, take your passport, zoom in on a tiny screen, and maybe even read in a language that you don't speak or your staff member does not understand. It is hell on earth, and this is the reality of the world that is going to have to be left in the past. Now, why is this happening? We know that before, as Thematic told us before COVID, rules would change globally every couple of months. And we had a lot of time to comply as the aviation industry. We had maybe a month or 6 months. Today, does anyone want to guess how often our systems at Zamna are updating the rules with our partners? Any guesses? Shout out. 20 minutes it takes, but how many times do we update the rules? How many changes each day, do you think? Every 20 minutes is a good guess. It's actually more. It's 1,000 changes a day. This is how many times the governments around the world decide that a list is changing from orange to red, that you need an extra visa, that you need an extra data set. Sneakily, you might need a test 72 hours before, but now it's changed to 48 hours. And what happens? We make it the passenger's problem. So the changes today are certainly irreversible, but what it leads to is absolutely frustrated passengers. The passengers are stuck in the middle, between the airline and the health provider, or between the airline and the vaccination provider. Wouldn't it be wonderful if governments around the world all agreed on something? But they have not. The trick is, we do have a way forward. Today, even though there's no accurate data and no accurate rules, you can use technology to arrive at this future state in the new world. We're actually hoping that some of the work we're doing today, which I will talk about in more detail tomorrow morning at 10:30, some of this work will be able to be more widely available than to our pilot partners today, which include British Airways, Iberia, and actually airlines in Latin America and Asia, who are already starting to see the value of automating some of this using a really interesting key. So what do passengers expect the airline to do? They certainly don't care that the rules are changing around the world. They certainly don't care that we're making it the passenger's job to check that we have everything. Who had to go on a website before they flew in here and check stuff before they got on the flight? So many of us. So many of us. Could the airline help you more? Probably. Are they able to today? A little. But the chances are the expectations are not being met. As a passenger, we now know that the expectation is, as if by magic, it's the airline who I buy the ticket with, is the airline's job to solve my end-to-end journey. Because I've paid for a ticket and I don't care that this is needing to be met with some regulations over there. It also is the reality that I don't want to have to go somewhere else or Google nearest health test center or what test do I need. We do expect the airline to take on that job. And I expect the airline to protect my data. Data breaches are everywhere, in the news every day. And it does not have to be that way. The final key things that we expect as passengers is not to have to do any new process. We know that passengers are not great at adopting digital identity. We have seen 1 million download my app. This is the solution come out of this industry. I have a really fancy phone, and I was really hoping one of those would work. But for every country I travel to, it's a new app, it's a new airline download, and it's something else. And this simply does not work at scale. Can I just check that my slides are working, please, guys? Edgar? All right, trying to double click. Oh, here we go. What is the common thread? The reality is that both airlines and passengers need all of this mess to be solved pre-airport, before I leave my house, in an ideal new world, without me having to do anything at all that I was not doing before COVID struck. There was one standard that we already had used around the world before COVID. Do you guys want to shout out what the standard is? Let's see if the room can guess. What's the one thing we all use to travel every day? Yes, your passport. The passport is an ICAO standardized EMTID, electronic machine readable document. And it's not an app. You don't need to download it. Yesterday morning I spoke to Juan Carlos Salazar, the Secretary General at ICAO, who told me about ICAO's initiative of No Country Left Behind. This means the ICAO is keen on solutions that don't exclude a huge percent of the less digital population. This means that the health passport apps are great for people like me, who have a fancy phone and a digital mindset, but they're not so great for my stepfather, who is an Oxford professor, but at 85, he is not downloading any new apps. It's also no good for my 4 kids, who can't use smartphones yet. It's also no good for destinations where one of our clients told us, Irra, we are flying out Wi-Fi routers and printers and putting them in the queue with computers. So our solution had to work in the middle of nowhere, with no country left behind, even if you are paying per minute in an internet cafe in the middle of nowhere. And that exclusivity means that people do get left behind. So the new era of passenger processing means you have to fundamentally shift from the old world thinking of manual checks, manual scans, even QR reading manually in the airport, downloads manually by passengers, or even downloads of lab apps by doctors. Because these are not technologists. We're talking about passengers or doctors. They don't like to download new process. And that is the old world. So at Zamna, we have a principle of not storing any data, not seeing it and not controlling it. We work in the background. So as if by magic, we connect the dots and make sure that your data is securely connected before you leave your house. What this means is that we're very proud to anchor everything we do to that ICAO standard. The ICAO electronic machine readable travel document is the key. It's the one thing we all have, no matter which country we're from, no matter what mobile phone we carry. So what we do at Zamna is set ourselves the challenge to say, can we create a system that does this? And hopefully it works. From one document entry of the passenger, using only the passport data set as already standardized globally by ICAO, we're able to verify securely behind the scenes not only that your passport as a passenger is valid, but also that it has a connected, associated travel health data set, whether that is a health test or a vaccination. We work with both. And I'm hoping that tomorrow morning, if you can join my workshop, we'll go more into the detail of this, because there's a lot to answer as to how we are doing it securely. Unfortunately, I only have 10 minutes left. So tomorrow morning, please join me in Rome 2 if you'd like to know how. The key to this also is that many solutions out there had an entire army of consultants, expensive consultants, teams of people trying to make technology adopted. The reality is the global traveling population has not managed to agree on what that one app or that one web form is. And that is because there is a lot of individual ego in the game. We have to put it aside and look at how the simplicity of technology, not the expensive technology, but the most simple one, can actually serve as this magical back-end connector of the dots. Our entire team set ourselves the challenge of having a tech deployment that takes less than a week and only requires one API data call. This was hugely difficult to achieve because, as we all know, the aviation industry runs on very, very old technology stack. It is extremely complex. There are a number of web servers, there's layers to it. Just writing one flag in the DCS causes headaches to most of our clients. Interestingly, I had to make sure that we hired 100% of our tech team from aviation backgrounds, because only then can you work and speak the language of your customers and make sure it really is doable. And if it's not simple, then it's not worthwhile. And that's the challenge we also set ourselves. So what is next for the traveling population? We're talking about identity and facilitation in a post-pandemic world. AVSEC has got to deal with so many more challenges than ever before. And the problem is twofold. The government put the pressure onto AVSEC and operations, who then give this pressure and pass on the responsibility to us, the individual passenger. This does not work in practice. One of my investors, a really smart guy, actually said it's easier for me to get my family in the car and drive from London to Lisbon. Because what happens if I turn up and the airline said, sorry, you can't board? I am not risking my family's one holiday a year with this kind of stress. And that responsibility has to go back. We cannot, as the aviation industry, say to the governments, don't create regulations. But we can say to our passengers, hey, we can help you while you're at home, we can take on some of the risk, and we can help you manage it without increasing the friction in the process for you. All you need to do is to have your ICAO standard passport document. And the reality we found with our clients is that most passengers are really happy with this. They do not want to adopt a selfie, upload, download, digital something. The world is not ready for digital identity. That is the reason that we changed our entire product, and we changed entirely how we were working with identity. I wrote an article in the Times in February of this year saying completely the opposite. My bet was that digital identity would take over the world because we all had to suddenly use it. We had to take selfies and upload vaccinations and download something and upload your tests. But guess how many percentage of guess how many percentage of traveling population has actually downloaded, has tried? Let's do two things. What percentage do you think has tried to download a digital identity travel app? Shout out. What percent has tried to download one? 20%? One guess? This is global figures. Even less than that. It's less than that. It's closer to 5% of those who have tried. And what percent of those who have tried do you think failed to complete the sign-up process? This is IAG figures, guys. Shout out. 95%, no, it's not that bad. Actually, 50% of passengers who've tried to download a digital app to travel with lost the will to live and lost the motivation to complete the sign-up. So they just didn't use it. And that's because we're not ready for it. They don't want to have a new form of identity, especially if you have, like me, 4 kids, my husband, my cat, my dog, my mother, my grandmother. It won't work. We just need something simple. And finally, we know that it is possible to not involve the passenger. We have to keep moving that responsibility back from the end passenger into our own world where we have full control of our IT systems, of the quality of the data that AVSEC is making decisions on, and of the quality of the data that we're making decisions on to facilitate airline operations. We know that streamlining facilitation with technology is possible. We have a great savings calculator that we give our clients, and they start to see how different the world will look like if we move from the old world of manual checks and huge volumes of back office process into the new world. Because the reality is, even the back office process was a cry for help. It's an extreme measure to ask all passengers to email or upload documentation and pay hundreds of salaries for humans to sit somewhere and check that you're simply matching the name and the date of birth on your ICAO travel document to your test or vaccination. You have, of course, the issue of the timing, whether your vaccine is in the right time or whether your test was taken at the right time of day for your flight. But at Zamna, we work with blockchain, and blockchain is a great tool for time stamping. And that's a quality of technology that really helps our clients make sure that the data is accurate, it's matched securely, and the timing is also right. So it is very doable, and it does not involve the passenger. So as I said, I'm going to wrap up. I have 4 minutes for questions if you guys would like to ask me things today. But please do join my workshop tomorrow morning at 10:30 a.m. in room 2. We can go into a lot more detail, and there's a huge interactive element. I'm happy to add you all on LinkedIn, or please email me direct on irra@zamna.com. Thank you so much for your time. All right, any questions? Oh. Yes. Oh, yeah, go ahead. Question. Do we have a mic, please? Yeah, 1 second. Please just introduce yourself so we know where you're from and what your name is. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So my name is Hassan Sharafa from Nawa Energy Company. I'm UAE citizen. It's very interesting, your presentation, actually, when you mention about ICAO passport, I think, digital passport. The only question I have is about how you will convince governments to share all citizens' passports into a single platform such as ICAO. This is my question.
Understood. So the question is about how we actually have a way to validate the world's passports, right? Without the governments sharing it.
No, actually, so your base for the information will be
The travel document.
travel document, which is the passport.
Correct.
Where the individual will get into that app and he will fill that information and he will have identity through ICAO. And now, speaking about security-wise, like now you will collect all these people data, and now we can have a big data about a nationwide data, and how you will ensure the integrity of this information. First, how you will get this information. Second, how you will ensure the integrity of this information not being breached or leaked to any other
Understood.
entities or...
Thanks, Hassan, for your question. Let me repeat, there are 2 parts. So part 1 is how do we obtain the ICAO standard travel document information. Part 2, how do we keep it secure? He's nodding, correct. On part 1, it's a really key point of what we at Zamna have been doing since before COVID. Our technology can help an airline see a document once. So the airline has a normal process of requesting you for your document. But what happens today is they will ask you every single time for the same document. Why? Because you're right. There is no way for an airline to call the government and say, hey, is this passport correct? There is no way to do that. If there was, it would be very insecure. You would have a whole spot of hot documents that somebody would want to attack in one place. So what Zamna did before COVID, we worked with the ICAO document standard to create a technology that can see a document once in an airline and create a digital tick about it. That digital echo, that green tick, is something that gets created every time your airline sees the same document. So you're building up a reputational score for that data set. And some of our clients said, okay, we have seen your passport already once, twice, 3 times. We know every time that it's the same passport, and we can trust the integrity of that data. But to start with, you have to see it once. So then, what we store is extremely smart. We don't copy the passport. We help the airline, we give the airline our technology to be able to recognize the passport without having to store it. And that is how we guarantee security for the data set, because not only do we have a cryptographic mathematical way to deal with this passport and to actually go from very sensitive data to no data at all, super jumbled up mathematical data, we also then take it like a mirror and splinter it into 1,000 pieces. That's the decentralized element of the Zamna technology. And for us to go back from that broken mirror all the way back into one passport data set, we had to go through a lot of pen testing when we first started with IAG, and they did a 6-month process with people who completed their PhDs, unlike me. Does anyone want to guess how long it would take you to go back from the splintered data into cryptographic data into original data? How many years? Just for one passport. Have a guess, it was your question. A little bit longer than 1 year. It would take you between 1 to 10 million years just for one passport. So that's the underlying way in which we work with that data. Thank you so much for your question. I hope it was useful for everyone. Really appreciate it. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Key. Ladies and gentlemen,